Okay, originally I was going to do a video, like my other videos, about the game Julian. You know, looking at the board, looking at the pieces, that kind of thing. But my son and I played this game yesterday, and it was such an unusual gaming experience that I thought I would comment more on the game itself, rather than just show you the pieces. Tell you kind of what happened in the game, and a little bit more of what I think of it as a game and simulation. Well, first off, the game appeared in the January-February issue in 2011 of Strategy and Tactics magazine. So the game concerns the Emperor Julian and the 4th century AD of the Roman Empire. Now, I've got the game set up here. It's A setup. You can see the linear defense of the Roman Empire here. These are the Limitani units showing you the Roman frontier. So they're doing kind of a perimeter defense. All the red units are Roman. Now these other colored units are the barbarian units. In this case, Persians, Armenians, the Alani, the Goths, the Sarmate, the Alemanni, the Franks, Saxons, and Vandals. And of course the subject matter is the Roman Empire in the 4th century and how it was racked by internal divisions and barbarian invasions. So as an example, if the Roman player picked the Italia chit, it means that he could move the Roman units in the province here of Italia. Now, if he had picked a command chit, let's say for example the Augusta unit, the Augusta chit, he could activate Augustus, who happens to occupy Constantinople, and that leader could move units to repel the barbarian invasion. So overall, the barbarians are trying to cause instability in the Roman Empire by invading it, and the Roman merely responds to the barbarian invasions. Now, one of the other aspects of the game are the stratagem markers. Now, they kind of fulfill the role of cards in CDG games. There's all kinds of these different events. There's Federate, and these are very important ones. I'll explain those in a second. And there's events, of course, as I mentioned, credos, military stratagems, which will affect military combat and movement. So the stratagem markers, like I said, perform the same role that cards do in a card-driven game. Now the important one, this Federate one, is kind of neat, because it's the only instance where you can actually move the enemy's troops. So if the Roman player plays a Federate stratagem marker, he can actually move barbarian units, and you might want to move them away from the frontier or someplace else. Now if the barbarian player gets a Federate or plays a Federate marker, he causes internal instability in the Roman Empire, causing rebel units inside the empire to occur or be created, causing internal stability. So the game really is about that. The barbarian is trying to cause chaos within the Roman Empire from the rear by causing rebel units to rebel against the Senate and invade the Roman frontiers. Now, anyone that knows the Roman history knows that the barbarians did not have a coordinated front. So the Saxons way up here were not cooperating with the Persians way down here. There was no coordinated offensive by the barbarians to destabilize the Roman Empire. And that's why this chit system is very good for this particular game. Now, as to comments on the game itself. This is really difficult because the crazy thing about this game, Julian, is that it's a very good simulation of the Roman Empire in the 4th century AD. So the game, as Joe designed it, is a very good simulation of the Roman Empire in the 4th century. As you play the game, you learn the history, and you really understand the situation as it was in the 4th century. The only problem I had with it, and my opponent, my son, had the same feeling, it was almost like watching a documentary film. we didn't really feel in control of anything. Since the chits determine everything, determine who moves, the moves were kind of common sense. In other words, let's say the barbarians broke through here, the Sarmatians broke through on the frontier. When the Roman got to move, and of course you didn't know when he was going to move, the logical response, of course, is to throw these barbarians back. And that's what we found often happened. The barbarians would make incursions, and the Romans would push them back, which of course is what they're supposed to do. It's just that it made for a little bit of a dry game. The responses were kind of what I would call common sense. So it does simulate the events in the 4th century. It just didn't make for a very interesting game. I felt like we were almost participating in a documentary film and just reenacting or recreating what happened in history. So in that sense, the game plays out very much almost like a solitaire game. Two people playing a solitaire game. Let's take a little bit closer look at the map. Now for a magazine game, this is a very nice, nicely produced product. You've got the Augustus unit here, that's the Emperor of course. And over here in the west you've got the Caesar units. These are bases. Now the numbers, by the way, the numbers on the left mean the combat value and the 0 means they can't move. Of course bases can't move. There is naval movement. These are the ports, things like that. Now basically the Roman player gets points for keeping his territory. He gets victory points for them. And the barbarians, by taking towns and destabilizing the empire, tries to reduce the Roman victory point total. So that's generally the way the game works. Combat results table is kind of interesting. You've got these DC, defender catastrophic results, and attacker catastrophic results, which means whole armies are destroyed. So the table works fine. I find most of the rules work fine. It's a very fine simulation. I want to emphasize that. But in the end, I found Julian to be a very dry game. Now I'm probably going to revisit it at some time. I actually think it might be, like I said, half decent as a solitaire game. And I really should give it another go with an opponent to see what goes on. I just felt it was a little dry as a game. But if you want a good simulation of the Roman Empire in the 4th century, this might very well be your cup of tea. And the odd thing is, after playing it for, I don't know, maybe an hour or so, we didn't get all that far in the game, my son and I just chucked it and we pulled out another old classic instead. And what game did we pull out? We actually pulled out Hannibal, the old Avalon Hill one, which I think is a very fine CDG game. Now, while playing Julian, I couldn't help but think of the old S&T magazine game, Fall of Rome. It kind of reminded me a lot of that game. And for those of you who saw it, this is the 2nd edition. It was also about the fall of the Roman Empire, causing a much, covering a greater time period. And in some ways, it actually reminded me of Imperium Romanum II, which is probably the definitive game on the Roman Empire. But I use those words with caution because even Imperium Romanum II is really a study of the Roman Empire, not really a good game. I didn't find it all that interesting to play, but it sure was the definitive study on it. So that kind of wraps up my comments on Julian. Don't know what else I can say except that if you want an interesting gaming experience and you're interested in the 4th century Roman Empire, you might want to break this one out. It's a pretty neat simulation. I just wonder if it's a good game. This video, like I said, is a little bit different than my other ones. Don't want to give a very negative, I don't even want to call this kind of a review, but I guess in essence it is. Anyway, I'll just wrap it up. That's Julian, 4th century Roman Victories. I think a good simulation, but maybe not the best game on the subject. Thank you for watching.